Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. It's Victory Tuesday in Atlanta, but it certainly doesn't feel like a Victory Tuesday. Probably the worst performance you'll ever see in a win, and the Falcons can tip their cap to Desmond Ridder for keeping their hopes alive, even though he did show a little bit of life there at the end, which would have just been poetic if somehow Desmond Ridder had completed a Hail Mary to win the game and go down.
Like 70-yard Hail Mary. Those
No,
were like
35.
Those were 40-yard passes.
It was 35 yards. And frankly, we're going to get into a lot of Kirk Cousins' performance, which was absolutely dreadful. I can't wait to hear Raheem Morris talk about it because he loved to bring up 300 yards passing last week. Well, he had 112 last night. And frankly, he had one interception. He had one interception, which was just a terrible ball. And if you go back and look at, there's a receiver open on the other side of the field. He forced
2 outlets, and then Darnell Mooney was open.
He forces it into that thing, which we've seen just far too many times. He forced a lot of balls in this game, and he forced one on the final drive when the Falcons are trying to salt this game away. He nearly throws a pick six. I mean, that would have just been like it was still, oh my God. Like, that's the thing. Like, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it didn't happen. Like, I saw him just throw it into double coverage
over results.
Yeah, like Kirk Cousins is lost, man. And we've been saying it for the last 4 weeks. I mean, he has lost confidence. What they showed the coaching staff, Zach Robinson, Raheem Morris, I'm sure it came from both of them, had absolutely no faith. They took the air out of the ball. They just tried to run with Bijan Robinson, who is fantastic. He's the shining bright spot. And there's some Drake London's a good player. Like, there's some good players on the offense. The offensive line can run block. Kirk Cousins is the number one reason holding this team back, and that was never more clear than it was last night.
Yeah, I mean, Raheem told you. I have a huge issue. I have more of an issue with Raheem Morris after this Monday night performance than I do Kirk Cousins, because when Kirk Cousins goes up there, he takes all the blame. He's a consummate professional. He has been his entire life. He's a likable guy. Raheem Morris goes in. I have multiple things to say about Raheem Morris. He goes into the locker room at halftime joking with Dan Orlovsky that Kirk Cousins finally got a touchdown pass so we can stop that narrative. It wasn't a narrative. He literally didn't throw a touchdown in more than a month. And in that same span, threw 8 interceptions. That wasn't a narrative. And I get it that Raheem Morris is one of the coaches who doesn't want to make things worse by being tense. But at a certain point, we have to get our stuff together. Talking about the week prior, hugging Arthur Blank amid a 3-game losing streak, which led to a 4-game losing streak. And then Raheem, in the post-game press conference, says something about playing soccer. When you give a guy $180 million, we're not trying to play. And listen, I get the flow of the game dictated, run the ball, maybe be a little bit more conservative. But that's not what you want when you pay a guy $180 million. That's the issue. And while everybody and their mothers can watch Kirk Cousins and go, yeah, that guy just doesn't have it, it's clearly on Raheem Morris to make this difficult yet necessary decision. I think, we can all be mad about Kirk Cousins this, Kirk Cousins that. The guy goes out there and he's trying. Like, you'd be a fool to say he's not trying. I have an issue with Raheem Morris making light of very serious. We care about this team. We spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of effort on this football team, and he's out there joking going into halftime against the worst team in the NFL.
I mean, yeah, they threw a touchdown pass on I believe it was the second drive, and did absolutely nothing after that. They looked terribly offensively. Everybody was talking about how the Falcons weren't doing enough, whether it was the guys in the studio, Jason Kelsey and those guys, and Ryan Clark, or was the guys that were announcing in the booth, the Louis Riddicks, the Dan Orlovskis. Like, it was very obvious that the Falcons, despite being up 9-3 and Kirk Cousins breaking his curse of not throwing a touchdown pass, were absolutely dreadful. They should have been up like 2 or 3 scores at that point, and then they completely lose faith because Kirk Cousins goes out there after that stupid joke, throws a pick on his first pass, which is just hilarious. I mean, it's just ironic.
You deserve it.
It's ironic as hell, but you're right. I mean, it is ridiculous that you go out there, you look like crap, and then you're making jokes. And I understand.
In the middle of a game.
And amid a 4-game losing streak.
Look, you're only up 1 score against the worst team in football.
Yeah, I mean, they looked very, very piss poor. It'd been very, I mean, like there's time for jokes and there's time for not jokes. And even after the game, when we're all pissed off, it doesn't matter that they won. We all watched the same game. They looked absolutely dreadful. We can't even pay attention to the fact that the special teams was great. The defense, for the most part, was absolutely spectacular because Kirk Cousins was so damn bad. And you called it a difficult decision. Listen, we watched this for 5 weeks. At this point, it's not a difficult decision. Like there's one of a couple things. Michael Penix is either terrible, and maybe that's the case. They're watching Michael Penix in practice, and despite
that's
all,
possible.
Like he could just be terrible, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to send him out there yet because he's awful. Or this is all about optics. And that's also very possible. We talked about it yesterday, and we talked about Jordan Schultz's report that this is about optics. And this is something that the Falcons have always cared more about than actually winning. Optics. How do we look? How do we look in the public eye? Which is all funny and ironic because they seem to be the league's punching bag because they always do stupid things optically. And this is just another example. I don't know how this is a difficult decision. I mean, they completely were like, we're not throwing the ball in the second half, and they were up 2 scores. Like even if he had thrown another pick, they would have been okay.
Let's talk about some of the stats. Let's dig into some of the numbers. We didn't take a single red zone snap in that game. We did not snap the ball one time inside of the Raiders 20-yard line. That's true. The Drake London touchdown came from outside of the red zone. Despite 4 of their 11 drives starting on the opposite side of the 50-yard line. 2 of those 4 drives started inside the 40-yard line. The Falcons had an average field position of 40 of their 40-yard line. You don't get that ever. They blocked 2 punts. They had 2 turnovers, yet we only, and a safety, and we mustered 1 touchdown. 1 touchdown. That is as bad. And they were missing Max Crosby. This is a bad Raiders defense that was only worse because they were missing their best player.
And they ran the ball for 167 yards. And they ran the ball spectacularly, 4.5 yards per carry. Bijan Robinson was the one shining light in this offense, as he's been for several of these weeks. Like Kirk Cousins has played absolutely dreadfully. I guess the one shining light, it seemed like after the game, outside of the dumb jokes that Raheem Morris keeps making and saying, hey, it's all about winning. Listen, you can say all that crap. We all see right through it at this point. This team's 7-7. They look nothing like a playoff team. They played like absolute crap. I would have loved you to just say they played like crap. We got rather than, it's a win's a win. No, it's not. That win was not a win. That was absolutely pathetic. But it did seem like Raheem Morris's tune around the quarterback position shifted a little bit. Every single week over the last 4 weeks, he has come in there and said, there's no quarterback controversy. There's nothing like that. He left the door open. He said, we got to get better at the quarterback position. Penix is on this team for a reason. It was certainly a different tune than we've heard from the previous 4 weeks where he completely shut it down 100%. Now, that doesn't mean that Kirk Cousins isn't going to be the starting quarterback, but it did seem like they would at least actually evaluate it for the first time this week. And I'm interested to see what he says today and going forward this week.
I mean, against the Giants team, that's right there with the Raiders, about the worst teams in football. You know, you would think this would be a prime opportunity to make that transition. But I wrote something on it, and there's 3 reasons why. And I think I tried to group as many reasons as I could into 3 categories that the Falcons will not bench Kirk Cousins. And you kind of outlined them a little bit. Go check it out on the site, sportstalkatl.com. The reports of Michael Penix lighting it up in practice are just categorically false. That is a possibility. He is going to be going against, theoretically, he would be going against a real NFL defense. That would be the Falcons defense, who've got guys. They've got some real guys on that side of the ball. That could be categorically false. And, that wouldn't surprise anybody coming out of Flowery Branch, peddling some crap like that. 2, the second reason, like you mentioned, optics. That Jordan Schultz report prior to the Vikings game came out that Friday and said that the Falcons are not going to make a quarterback change because of optics. Jordan Schultz said, I truly believe that. I think that that's probably the most likely scenario because, first of all, you already have bad optics giving him $180 million and then 6 weeks later drafting his successor with your most valuable draft pick. That's bad optics. It's only getting worse now that you were clearly in the wrong for thinking that a 36-year-old coming off an Achilles injury could bounce back to what he was pre-Achilles injury. It's all bad optics. And the third one, which is kind of a grouping of everything, is this is an incompetent organization. You've got an incompetent head coach who's clearly in over his head. He doesn't have enough fiery jazz words to really, settle down the fan base when it gets this bad. You've got a GM who is neutered at best. He is.
Where is Terry Fontenot?
I haven't seen him answer one question this
whole
entire season. And then you got a guy in Arthur Blank who can just be schmoozed. You show up in a 3-piece suit, say family a couple times and hug them, and you can have whatever you want. Get me in a room with Arthur Blank, and I'll be running AMBCE. There's 3 reasons, and they're all horrible reasons.
Here's the thing that I want to say about the optics, because I think that is the reason. I don't think that can be argued. But
it's just in line with everything.
But we're at a point where optically, I think we're at a point where it's worse to keep sending out Kirk Cousins out there because he's clearly just lost a leg and he is not the best guy to lead this team unless, like you said, Michael Penix is just absolutely terrible. We're at the point where the optics may be worse keeping Kirk Cousins under center than they are keeping at the quarterback because they are. I mean, there is not Kirk Cousins isn't going to be traded for this offseason. I mean, there's absolutely no one. And we
could talk about that.
I just. Regardless, you're still going to have to eat it. It's
the Falcons are dumb, but there's dumber teams out there, and everybody needs a quarterback. There's not going to be any quarterbacks available this offseason.
Okay. Regardless, you're going to have to eat a ton of cash.
Yes.
He cannot be the starting quarterback of the Falcons when you have Michael Penix in the building in 2025. No. And if you were hanging on to that thread, that is all but out the window. I mean, it has been an absolute mess over the last 5 weeks. He looks completely lost, and it sucks because, 4 or 5 weeks ago is a different conversation. I do want to get into some of the good things we saw, particularly the defense last night. We'll do it after the break.